Who were the top 3 most influential people in your early life? If you were in music, I bet at least one of those was your music teacher. Welcome to Zeitgeist Radio, where we learn about musical subcultures from people in the scene. If you love this, be sure to subscribe. Today, I'm speaking with a high school choir teacher about the challenge and beauty of shaping lives, knowing that your influence may be lifelong. My guest today is Rachel Landowski, a high school choir teacher in Western Washington. Rachel, welcome to Zeitgeist Radio.
Thank you, Morgan. I'm so excited to be here and excited to see you again.
Yeah, this is so fun because we sang in high school together, and now we're talking about high school choir together. It's like a full circle.
Well, and I feel like you have ventured off that, high school choir path into a very just interesting, eclectic musical life. And I think that's so cool. And then I just stayed right in the niche where we met. So,
well, I'm still in choir. That never changed. I actually kind of had a moment at my college reunion because high school choir, college choir, immediately into community. I still sing with the master chorale down here. I just never stopped being in choir. So
good for you.
So I know you musically, but can you, for our listeners, can you describe kind of your background with music? You're a high school music teacher now and middle school, as I just learned. But before that, what is your personal journey with music to kind of orient our listeners?
Well, yeah. So my mom is a musician, and she was, when I was a kid, a piano teacher. Then for a while, she taught middle school choir, which she did not love because it's hard. And she had a traveling youth choir in our hometown where we grew up together. And so they, and my dad is actually also a musician. Together they sing in our symphony chorale. And, they met with him playing on a blanket at a kegger with his guitar, and she, of course, wandered over and,
That's so
in the
cute.
60s. Yeah, they're silly. So their relationship is really based on singing, and my brothers sing and I sing. And I also grew up a pianist. So I started playing because there was tons of piano in my home. My mom was teaching piano. I was playing with 2 hands by the time I was 4, by ear. So I was just kind of a weirdo. And so they started me in piano in 2nd grade with this incredible teacher. And I went with her until my junior year. And I did a lot of competing. I was pretty serious and thought at one point I might become a piano performance major. I went to piano camp one summer.
I remember being really impressed and kind of intimidated by you because I also played piano, but you were so much better than me.
Oh, really?
I know. Just oh my God.
I don't remember that. I will say that my parents definitely incentivized it. It was kind of well, if you practice, you don't have to do the dishes, and so I was
sure.
Great, I'll practice. And I loved it. It was at that time so much a part of my identity. I just went to my 20-year reunion and chatted with some friends that I didn't know super well. One friend that I'm really close with, and then another friend that, was just kind of in that other circle. Yeah. And that person was just oh yeah, you were just the pianist, that was my little identity.
Yeah.
But in my junior year in high school, my piano teacher unexpectedly died in an auto accident. And that was the first tragedy of my young life. I hadn't lost a grandparent yet. And it was absolutely awful. And so that really changed the trajectory for me. I sort of switched my focus to singing and musical theater. I started performing with the community theater. And then, that was that pivotal time, junior to senior year, where I thought, okay, well then instead of doing piano performance, I'm going to do choir. And so I'm going to teach choir. And so I ended up at Washington State University because the University of Montana was pretty focused at the time on performance and opera. They were kind of like a conservatory, which was just not what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I did not want to go to MSU. I can't remember why. I was just I'm not going to MSU, in my 18-year-old brain. And so I went to Washington State, where I had met with the teachers, and, it was a state college I could afford. It was the next one over from U of M, you just sort of kept driving west, and everybody was
for those listening, Idaho doesn't count there.
That's true. Well, I mean, there is a college in Idaho, but they're much smaller.
No. And if you're driving west, it's like 20 miles of Idaho. So
yeah,
no,
it's like the Panhandle.
she does not have her geography wrong.
Well, yeah, it's really like, Moscow's like 10 miles from Pullman. So, which is where I went to college. Oh, but what I was saying is that I met with the teachers and I felt like they were focused on education. They were focused on, how do you become a teacher? And so then, did all that. And then you take these methods courses of here's how you teach theory and here's how you teach, pedagogy, vocal pedagogy. Here's how the voice works. Here's how the vocal tract works. And then you do choral methods, like here's how to pick music. Here's how to study your music so that you know how to share it with people who don't read music, which is quite a shocker when you leave college and you start teaching and you realize kids can't read music. Like they don't know the word forte. You're like, oh, shocking. Okay, let me. Okay, this is a music stand, and next, like, it's kind of like it was kind of crazy, and you kind of think they can do all this stuff because you've been doing it, and then you learn. Okay, we had to start from a totally different spot than I thought. So that was at first discouraging, but now is amazing. I love it. I love seeing those. I mean, the classic teacher. I love seeing those like. Oh, that's why the music staff is there? Like, it's just like a graph. If it goes up, it gets higher. Of course, you've been telling them that since, 6th grade, but they figure it out in 10th grade, so it's very exciting. But so that was kind of my trajectory. And I started teaching part-time in 2008 because it was a recession. There were no teaching jobs. No one was retiring. I taught kindergarten and 2nd grade and middle school choir. And then I taught just middle school choir for 3 more years while I did, private piano, private voice, and I was an accompanist. I had 6 jobs. And then I got my full-time job, which was middle school and high school choir in a district that's a little larger to the north. But then 2 years after that, a job opened up in my husband's district, and my husband is a band director. And so he went to school in this school district. He went to my high school that I teach at. And so I wanted to be in kind of with him in his group. He's also our music coordinator, which means he's the liaison between the all the music teachers and the district office. And so he's very good at advocating like for money for us and support for us. And hey, we need another class. Hey, we need $10,000 worth of risers. And so I wanted to move to this district because I knew I would have that advocate. Plus it's my husband, so I've been now at this job for 15 years, which if you think about other people, 15 years in the same job, like that's insane. But teaching is one of those weird niches where you find your spot, or most people find their spot.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about that too, because teaching is really not for everybody.
No,
you said it wasn't for your mom. I've tried it. It's not for me, like in small doses, but not as a full-time thing. What made you, and also like when you're 18, I don't know how it was for you. When I was 18, I thought I knew, but like what I ended up like, you're young, there's a whole world out there. So you thought you wanted to teach, and then it turns out that you did. So what was that moment where you did you have a class where you're like, yes, like that affirmation, like, no, this is actually what I want to do?
Yeah, it took like 4 years. I mean, you just put your nose to the grindstone because it's a huge learning curve. You're 22, your students are 14. So it's not a huge difference. You look like a child. Like it's a weird, I think I was 24 because I graduated high school when I was 19 and it took me 4.5 years. And so I was slightly older than your, youngest college graduate, but I always looked super young. So, you're not respected. People don't really care whether you sink or swim. So you just put your head down, and I'm bullheaded. I'm stubborn. Like I decided I was going to teach and I just was going to do it.
Nice.
But I did find that in middle school choir, I kind of loved teaching kids like where the line is in both behavior and like behavior as a human and behavior as an ensemble member.
Yeah.
And so I teach them, here's the line and here's what's going to happen when you go over the line. And I figured out that I was really good at that consistency of what happens when you go over the line, and being able to mold and shape and control a group of 50, 13 and 14-year-olds. Like it makes you feel like a superhero. So when I learned that I could do that, I was like, I'm awesome. Okay.
Yes.
And so middle school actually is kind of still my jam. I went to the high school because everybody wants to do it and it's fun and they can do more.
Yeah.
And I still do love it, but being back at the middle school for one class, I adore it. So
that's amazing.
yeah.
So you brought up like behavior. A lot of people find teenagers, the idea of working with teenagers kind of scary or intimidating. What is it about them that you enjoy working with?
I will say they are impulsive. And
Yeah.
so it can be a little scary because they look like fully formed humans and then sometimes they act like a 9-year-old and it's very surprising. So like that is kind of freaky, but I think they're so, once you get them on your team, they will do anything for you. Like my students, I had a medication I was taking and I couldn't drive. And I was like, hey, can someone drive me it was concert day. And I was like, can someone drive me to the middle school to pick up the amp that I forgot and back to the high school and then back to my house? And the kids were like, there were like 4 of them. They're like, I will do it. Like they'll do anything for you because they're on your team.
Yeah.
And so then you get to build that team with these highly idealistic, super capable, really fun humans. I kind of like their little shtick too. Like I like their funny little words. Like, okay, these ones are 3 years old, but they have this word this one's actually 5 years old, called drippy. And it means your outfit is cute. And so they'll say, do I look drippy? And I like to learn the words and then use them wrong. And then the kids are like, oh, stop. There was one for a while that was called bussin'. I'd be like, guys, is this bussin'? Does it slap? Like I kind of love their little like silly vernacular and their funny little not on TikTok. I call it tic-tac, because I'm not even on it. But I kind of I love learning their little things. And I love it when they share music with me and I like the music that they're listening to. Half the time it's 80s, which is hilarious. And I just love their developingness, like they definitely don't have that full frontal lobe, but I love watching it kind of grow like from this like kind of almost lizard brain to this like, okay, I can make decisions better now. And I learned that I'm stubborn. And so I'm going to like try to temper that. And I learned that, in a partner, my love language is physical touch and my partner's is not. And so we broke up. Like we have all these conversations and I love it. It's so fun. Or I'm gay and my parents don't know. How do I tell them? Like these are all conversations that I have had. And so I love being that safe adult in their life.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that point is perfect here because like I was thinking that there's a lot of insecurities that come up still for me in music. I had an instance this summer where I'm still a high soprano and there was a high D and I was the only one on it. And
you mean above high C, like that really big one?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that would be
it's really high. And I even had a solo in the same concert and I was like, I don't even care about that solo. That high D is like, it was my focus. And we had a recording session and 2 concerts and I only got it right on 1 concert and I got it wrong in the recording session. And it's like ruined my summer.
Yeah.
So, and I'm, an adult who's been singing for so long and I have like so many tools to work through these things and it still like hits me. So in music generally, there's insecurities that come up. And then being a teenager, there's so much more. So how do you approach that with that sounds so intense to like combine that feeling with music and then also being all of the hormones of being a teenager.
Yeah. It took a long time for me to figure this out, but it's really about seeing people. So when I first meet a kid, I just really focus on, okay, what is important to this child? How is this child in the world? how can I describe them to themselves? Like I might say to a kid, hey, I've noticed, that you don't like to speak up, and I'm very okay with that, but I want you to know that this is a comfortable space, and then they go, oh, I'm seen. And so that's one technique, is to really see people and show them that you see them. Another is to, well, first, you as the teacher have to be vulnerable. So my kids know a lot about me. They're very present in my life. They love it when I tell silly home stories, that my kid has been great fodder for that. But before that, when I didn't have a kid, it was pets, and so I try to be a human, and that's very helpful. It is like, I'm definitely like out there with them. Like this health thing I was telling you about where I couldn't drive, like I had to take some time off work, and like there was no hiding it. Like I was just like, I'm going through a thing. And the kids were like, and I was like, it's not going to kill me, but like everybody knows it, and all their parents know it, because I'm like a public figure, and so that is hard and awesome, so it's the first one is seeing people. The second is the vulnerability with, yourself being vulnerable. So I sing for them all the time, obviously. And then the third is, I try to name those insecurities. Like if it's time to try out for a solo, I'll say, hey, we're going to do this a lot of times because your first time, your body might betray you a little bit. And then we'll talk about that fight or flight response and what might be happening with the heart rate and the breath and maybe the knees or the other, parts of our bodies. And then kids will speak up and say, oh, my teeth start to chatter or whatever, and then other people will say, well, all of a sudden I can't breathe. It sounds so much better in my room. Like we had this long conversation, and then all of a sudden the wall comes down. Like, oh, I'm not the only person that has fear and has trouble singing a solo. And if I wipe out, nothing bad will happen to me and everyone will understand that feeling. Okay, then I can do it, And so if I have a solo part of a song, or even if I don't, I'll pick a passage that's like the best, most fun thing to sing. And I'll have kids sing it by themselves as many times as they want. They get to take as many runs at it as they want, which then at some point breeds some big success moment and they can feel it. And once you know that, then you can do so much, It's just this long process. Singing's so vulnerable, as you know. So you have to be gentle as a teacher.
I love that. And I can think of moments when that would have been really helpful in our choir.
Well, that wasn't the kind of choir we had. We were competitive. We were intense. I was never a soloist in our choir for a reason. I mean, I'm not actually a soloist. I'm a great reader and I'm a very good second soprano. I'll find you a middle note and I'll sing it. But, I'm no soloist. But yeah, I think I might have gotten better if there had been a little more safety in auditioning, but it was sort of like, can you do it? No? Okay, moving on.
Yeah. So what challenges, we've talked about some like major successes you have. What challenges do you have with teaching?
Well, I mean, apathy is the worst thing ever. So it really bothers me if a kid, because I'm an elective, if a kid is there and not doing the job. Yeah. Yeah. In the middle school, I actually have a really great system for it where everybody has to give themselves a score on a 1 to 4 every day. And there's criteria for meeting that 4-point mark. And then if they don't, I publicly say, well, you had gum, so that's a 3. Or I publicly say, well, you fell asleep, so that's a 2. And then I publicly say, well, I had to move you, so that's a 1. Like they have their like very specific. The high school's a little harder because you really can't do that to them because they'll freak out and be sad. And in the middle school, I can embarrass a little bit more, and at the high school, they can't handle that. They're just like not at the place. So that one's harder. And so you have to motivate basically by like being so magnetic that people want to work for you. And sometimes I get it right. And sometimes I don't. Like last year, I had 2 really beautiful singers that for some reason never got on board with my system and didn't come back their sophomore year. And it was devastating. I was like, I have lost these high powered, talented people. And I even asked them, I was like, hey, is there anything, that I did to make it so you didn't come back? And they said no, but I still feel that like maybe there was, so that piece is very hard. When a kid leaves the program, you definitely take it personally. Or when a kid is in the program and doesn't care about it, again, you really take it personally. And that's the hardest part of the job.
No.
And calling parents, that part sucks.
Calling parents.
Hi, it's Mrs. Landowski from this high school. And, Joey did some things today that were not great. And, but, I want to tell you that sometimes he's a great person. And, do you have any strategies for working with Joey? Like, it makes me so nervous. And sometimes they say, actually, he's a terror at home. Good luck. And other times, they're like, oh yeah, this is going on at home, and you get the information you need. But it's still, even though I'm almost 40, I still kind of feel like, I don't know, like I'm like, like in the principal's office or something. Like,
right.
I'm on the spot. Yeah.
You're calling like a real parent, even though you are a real parent. That's how I feel.
Yeah, that's it. Like, I'm not a real parent. And when I wasn't a real parent, that was very hard. When I was 26, like, but there's so many problems that can be solved by calling parents. And if you don't do it, you're just going to end up with a whole storm. So that part is a bummer.
Yeah. Oof.
Well, just as we talked about, that frontal lobe is not developed. So most of the time they're amazing.
And I know, as you're talking, I'm like trying to think back and remember, like, what was I like in high school? I
am
think I ever had to call my mom.
No, I'm sure they didn't.
Let's take some big picture moments here, because when I think back of some of the most influential people in my life, the first people who come to mind are my music teachers. And how does it feel to be, like, you have people who have left your program and are like 15 years, like for 15 years, you've been influencing people. How does it feel to know that you could be shaping someone's, like, you are shaping someone's entire life? Like, I still feel influenced by our high school choir teacher and just some of the things that they taught me, my piano teacher. Like, how does that feel? That must feel amazing or weird. I don't know. Tell me.
It's two things. It does feel amazing. And sometimes you do get like these beautiful thank yous. Like, I had a student who was the ASB president who wrote me, he just, graduated last year, and he wrote me a 2-page letter all about all the things he felt that I had done for him, included many song titles like in the letter that it's hard to describe, but it's like, we sang Abba's Thank You for the Music. And he said, and I really want to thank you for the music. And, there was Bridge Over Troubled Water was in there, and some other ones. And he also sent me $80 so I could go out to dinner with my husband. Kid's 19, by the way. But, like, you feel with moments like that, you feel invincible. You feel that you could do anything. In other moments, though, when you don't do so well, you feel very responsible. You feel that you have failed a child in some way. And it's almost like being a parent to 150 children. And that can be very heavy. So like if a kid leaves the program, or if they, I don't know, if they have a hard time when they graduate, you feel sort of responsible for it, that maybe, there's something you could have done and something you could have told them. I had one kid who ended up, just kind of at the wrong college. And so she ended up in a sorority that was just horrifying. And she came back and told me about it. And I was, it was just this terrible experience for her. And I felt like, man, I was in a sorority and I hated it. Why didn't I tell you that? Like, don't get in a sorority. They're not the same as they were when our moms were in them, and no shade to any sorority people. Some people I think can find lovely places, but for me, it wasn't a good experience. And I was bummed that I didn't share that with her, because it was a terrible experience for her too, and that's a small example of ways that you feel responsible for them when they leave,
Yeah.
That's a lot to take on, Rachel.
I know. And I'm sort of a perfectionist, and I'm sort of a person that just like, I take my work very seriously. And so I do take on a lot. And my kids will tell you, I am a terror on concert day. I am a different person. And I will say to them, hey, you're about to poke the bear. And none of us want to see that. And they'll be like, okay. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you have to be that a little bit. Our high school director was definitely a little bit.
Well, I mean, and as the leader of the group, you are very like all of it's on the line, and the people that are pulling the sled are a little bit unreliable because they're teenagers. So that can be very scary. And sometimes they show up and they pull the sled and they're great, performers, and other times they don't. And then you're like, was that them or me? And probably a combination. But yeah, it's there's tons of highs and lows for sure, which I think is different from some other people's jobs. And in some ways I love it. And in some ways, still 15 years in, I think I wonder if they'd like me to be a bank teller, or anything else. Even though I'm sure nothing else would be as fulfilling as this is, I do still sometimes think like, oh boy, is this a tough road,
Yeah.
I don't have very many kids go on to major in music because it's a niche, and like, unless you want to teach, it's not a great idea, especially in our current economy, and I feel like when we were kids, it was a little more like, yeah, you want to go get a music degree, get one, but now kids are kind of, they're needing to find a path because of how millennials, we had so much trouble getting jobs. And, so I think Gen X has learned like, okay, we need to be employable. And so just a lot of kids don't choose music because their parents are like, oh no, you can't choose that. So then they'll be doing engineering. I was just talking to an alumnus today who goes to UW, super duper brilliant kid. She's doing engineering, and she was telling me about that, but she was like, it's super hard and there isn't time for choir. And I just said, well, if you can pop in for a quarter, she was like, I miss it so much. She was like, I miss you so much. And she was like, I feel like my fun time, which was choir, went away. And so she was, she's very happy, other than she misses that piece. But I was excited because I was telling her about Jeffrey Bors, who's at UW, and he is one of my mentors in my teaching career.
Nice.
And I've done several institutes with him, and he is just so empathic and loving, and that's how I teach. So I feel like, if she were able to pop in with him for a quarter,
she'd feel right at home.
Yeah, she'd be so happy. Aww. Yeah. I did get to FaceTime with her and just double check on her, because she's kind of my COVID babies, like the kids that I had in 2020 and they graduated in 2024. They're sort of like my trauma babies, because it was choir online and it was horrific. And I didn't get to meet them until they were sophomores. Well, they were like at the end of their freshman year. And then we all had to come out of it. We had to figure out how to normal, and how, because singing was so restricted. So for a long time, we were 6 feet apart, we were masked, and this was this group, and so when they left, I felt like we just had a super duper special connection. And so I actually grieved it all summer, basically. And then some of them came back to the concert last night and sang a piece that they had sung that we were redoing. And it was impromptu. Like, they just jumped on stage, and I was like, you guys come on stage. And one of the kids who's like a veterinary assistant, she was like, I'm wearing scrubs. And I was like, no one cares. And so they hopped on and sang with us. And it was so special. Like, they're just such a special group. And and the current kids were like, they were so excited. And so we just, we haven't had so many special moments together, and I get to have them for 4 years. And I did start after COVID teaching at the middle school. So technically, if that keeps up, which it probably won't because the program is growing, I could have a kid from 6th grade through 12th grade, which is forever.
Yeah. That's like all of their developmental year, like emotionally developmental year.
Yeah. And you're not as close with every kid, but
of course.
definitely have my kids that kind of become family, and it's very special.
Yeah.
I asked Rachel to come on my podcast after seeing a particular video she made on social media that I am obsessed with. The video was something like things I wish my students knew I was thinking about them during their auditions. In the video, she pulls out her teacher notebook and reads some of her notes. Here's a few of them. The high notes, so pure and clean. Relax, you are ridiculously lovely. There's a subtle sureness and musicality that is really pleasing. Where have you been taking lessons? I love this so much because I feel like so often we believe people are judging us or thinking the worst of us, especially in high-pressure situations like an audition. But I think we have it backward, and people are more often than not thinking positive, wonderful things about us. If you're enjoying this conversation, please take a moment to like Zeitgeist Radio on Facebook or Instagram, or if you're really loving it, you can sign up for my newsletter on my website at zeitgeistacademy.com/radio. I send out weekly content about cool things I learn from my guests. Now let's get back to Rachel.
We talked about insecurities, and you talked about how you share your vulnerabilities. There's a lot of like trust kind of built in with that. Like, if you're going to create an environment where they're sharing insecurities, they have to trust that you're going to hold that. And then also for you to share, so much about your life, you kind of have to, there's like a level of trust that they're not going to abuse that somehow.
Mm-hmm.
So like, can you talk about trust a little bit? Because I think it sounds like that is kind of the basis of the relationship that you have, that you at least seek to build with your students.
I think, I do think that I am different than some other colleagues who do it differently. They keep the professional lines a little tighter and maybe relate with more humor and less personal stories, or maybe relate just in a different way. So I think I might be different in that. The trust piece, I guess, it goes back to what I said early in the conversation about why I like teenagers, is that once they trust you, they will do anything for you. They will babysit your child. Tonight, my son is at karate with one of my students because, I wanted to do this, and my husband is at marching band. And so I called my student, or I texted her, which some people don't even give out their phone number, but everybody's got mine,
Yeah.
And, like she was like, I am so there and excited to do it, So I think that is the trust that we've built together, like myself and those students. And and they watch my dogs if I leave, like it is nice to have that community of teenagers. And I like giving them my money, like, because I know they need money. And so I might as well pay a person that I love and care for, and rather than like, somebody I don't know. And so I think there are other teachers that might think that blurs a line, and I think it does. But my husband and I have both made the choice to blur the line and really be part of the community and really be part of the village for our kids. And as we just talked about, it can be very heavy.
Yeah.
But mostly it's very awesome.
Yeah. Well, and I think like music blurs that line anyway, because some of your most emotional moments are making music, and some of my most emotional music moments are making music. So
I mean, last night I was conducting, and I did not know that those alumni were going to show up, and I did not know that I was going to remember to call them on stage and that they were going to come and sing with us. And it was a medley, so fast song. Well, I'll just tell you about, so it was Here Comes the Sun, and then In My Life, and then Can't Buy Me Love. And when we were singing In My Life by the Beatles, I mean, first off, I love the Beatles. And second off, I'm just looking at these beautiful people, and I just start crying. And I just smiled to the kids like, and they were like, they were like, they were totally fine with it. I'm crying. And luckily the last song like had a big, nice kind of dance group. So then I came out of it, so I didn't mess anything up conducting wise. But, we had a moment. There were 150 teenagers staring at me crying, and I owned it. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. That'll happen.
Since you mentioned some songs, let's shift gears to something maybe a little lighter. How do you choose rep? I mean, I know that you took an entire class on that. Can you give me the like 30-second version of like, how do you know what's going to fit
Well,
to the concert, fit your kids?
I'm sorry that it's not a 30-second version, but first off, you mentioned in your first questions about that, like how do you keep up with trends?
Yeah.
And so yeah, the new trend is Jake Roon said everyone's singing him. And my buddy, I have a dear friend who teaches at this school. Actually, she teaches at my first school, at my first high school. She took over my job when I left. And she is a total nerd, and she would totally tell you this. And so she just listens to choral music all the time. And so then I'll say, okay, I have this kind of group, like intermediate, strong baritones, you know, or whatever. Like I'll give her some kind of specification, and she'll say, try this, this, and this, you know. And so her big gal that she loves is Elaine Hagenberg, who is incredible. Like my friend has sung most of her music. She's a fairly, you know, she's an our age composer, and plus she's a gal, which we both love, you know. And I sang one piece, we sang one piece of hers last year, and of course we're now going to do more. But my buddy and I, like, she was like, hey, I'm doing this and this and this for solo and ensemble where, you know, our groups compete. She was like, so just make sure you don't sing those. And I was like, oh yeah, good call. You know, so we share collegially. I think that's a big thing, is that rep piece, because it's a ton of work to keep up on it.
Yeah.
And then like we do a lot of conference sessions. When you go for professional development, we do a lot of what we call reading sessions, where people just come up, you know, like they run a session with their 10 favorite pieces, and they'll give you like their little elevator pitch of why they liked it. And then you'll read through it. And then you'll mark it, you know, and think, okay, well, this would work for a group that didn't have very strong altos, or whatever it was, or for a group that had really strong altos and whatever, like because you're tailoring to the humans that are in the room.
Right.
And I will say that some people pick out their whole concert season before the kids walk in. I pick out 30, 40 pieces that are just on a list, and I just start pulling them and handing them out. And because I just don't know what's going to work until I know it's going to work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You don't know your singers.
Yeah. You have to. And I do know them. Like some of them are returners, but in different amalgamations, they're different. You know, when the seniors have graduated and the juniors become seniors and the sophomores become juniors, like it changes the whole dynamic. And so that's going to change how they sing.
Yeah.
Like this year's group has these super bright, they're just naturally super bright, which I love bright sound, but I'm like, folks, tall vowels, space, like, you know, because that's just their sound. And of course, like they have to have space and tall vowels. And so I'm just like hammering them every day. Like,
yeah.
But that's this group, you know, and I've had other groups that sang like this. And then I have to be like, okay, bring it forward because you're not in tune, you know, and like that's, you know, you have to kind of tailor.
Yeah. Not to mention, I'm sure guys' voices are dropping all like right and left. So like you
the boy piece,
the year,
a
tenor or an alto maybe. And then
the nice deal about that is I have a friend who's actually the organist at my church, he's a beautiful singer. I think his degree is from Westminster Choir College.
Wow.
So the big leagues. Yeah. And I have also, I'm very, very fortunate that I have a booster group that has a little money. And so if a kid, especially the young men, but I do it with the treble singers as well, but the tenor bass singers, if I'm switching them voice parts, like I have a junior this year who switched from singing bass all 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, and he's singing tenor this year. I was like, okay, you need to go see my guy, because yes, your voice wants to be tenor, but you need to know how to be tenor.
Yeah.
And so he's going to go take, you know, we pay for 4 lessons, and the kid goes and they come back with and sometimes then their parents, you know, throw in on it. And other times, you know, that's not financially feasible, but at least they get those 4 lessons where they can pick up a ton of stuff that they then bring back to the group. And sometimes they'll even be in class and they'll be like, oh, hey, Dan says try this, you know, or Bree, who's kind of my treble singer voice teacher says, let's try this. And I'll be like, okay, we're going to do that. Cause that gives me kind of this team that helps us create great sound.
That's so cool, Rachel.
It's very cool. Yeah. Yeah. The booster group runs it. I will say it's like a total, it's like really hard. We run the concessions at the home football games. And so you have to get 10 volunteers for those Friday nights. Well, actually, no, you have to get like 15 volunteers, which getting people to volunteer these days is difficult. Yeah. You have to buy all the items, price all the items, make all the hot dogs, like inventory, everything. Like, and my buddy and I, he's the band and orchestra teacher at my school, like it kicks our butts in the fall because we're like, okay, do we need Pepsi? Okay, how many cases of water do we need? Okay, well, do you think we need to raise our prices? Well, I think we should sign up for a Square so that we can take in digital payment. Like, it's this whole and neither of us are numbers people. We're both musicians. I look at a spreadsheet and it just starts to swim, so it's not really my wheelhouse. But then we have all this money that we can use to just pump up what we're doing, which is awesome.
That is so cool.
And we don't have to send kids out to sell grapefruit on the street, So that's nice.
Win-win.
That's what I tell the parents. I'm like, this keeps your child off the street peddling fruit, just so you know. And they're like, okay, I'll volunteer.
Gosh, I forgot about that. We totally peddled those weird lists of things to go to tour. Those weird lists, and you'd go and they'd have to write their numbers.
And we would pedal, and with my mom's youth choir, we pedaled poinsettias. And so like my mom would go to symphony chorale and she'd say, okay, we're selling poinsettias. And of course, all of her friends would have to sign up for a poinsettia so that, I could have money to go to Italy or whatever.
Yeah.
It was great.
Did you go on tour?
Yeah, we go to Disneyland. So I don't do anything but Disneyland because Disneyland is the best. You don't run into any behavior problems because they're in Disneyland. You don't lose anybody because they're in Disneyland. And there's, we stop at a college where we get a session with the college conductor. So that's cool. And then on your first day in Disneyland, you perform. And then in the second day, you get to do what's called a studio session. So you go backstage and you get to record like a song from a movie. And then you get to hear it back with the movie on the screen. And they have a sound engineer. And so they kind of clean it up. And one time we sang this, you might not even know this reference, but one time we did this song from High School Musical, and like there were two kids who totally nailed the solos, and then we got to hear their voices, like Gabby and Troy. And this is such a millennial thing, so I don't know if you know High School Musical, but like it's a silly.
Everyone else knows it. I'm hopeless.
I love that for you.
Everyone else knows it. No.
I love that you use your counterculture enough that you don't know High School Musical. That makes me happy because I'm embarrassed that I know it.
I feel like I should know it.
I don't. I'm not recommending it to you. I'm just telling you it was really funny when we did it in Disneyland. But yeah, so we go we were going every 4 years, but I'm now going to go every 3 because sometimes a freshman, if that's their chance to go, they're not quite ready to like jump on a plane with their peers. And so then they don't get a chance to go. And so then if they don't go their freshman year, they'll have a chance to go their senior year. And if they loved it their freshman year, they can go their senior year. And in the past, my husband and I have done it together. We both bring our groups. So that's really fun. And then our groups kind of hang out, and that's kind of fun. But I think, with our son being 7, his grandparents took him for the first 2 trips. But after the second trip, they're like, we're too old and Disneyland is too big. And I was like, I get it. So we may rotate this next session. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. So no buses where you like drive across Washington for like, what is it, like 16 hours on the way to San Francisco, singing literally the entire way?
No, Mama does not sleep in a gym. Mama does not travel in a bus. Mama goes on a plane. Yeah. I mean, there are people that do it. I won't.
You got posh. Look at you.
I know, I got fancy. I can't do it. I need my sleep. I can't sleep in a gym, and I'm car sick and I can't go on a bus. So I just take a plane.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So I have a final question we'll end with, but before I get to that one, what do you wish people, like more people knew about high school choir programs? Now's your chance to say whatever you want.
I wish they knew we were there. I think people don't realize like every high school has a choir. I also wish that people understood that athletes can also be singers.
Yes.
And in fact, like when I get an athlete, like I've got a football player and a soccer player right now, and volleyball and tennis, cross country. When I get an athlete, they're always the stars because they understand how to be on a team. They understand work ethic. And a wrestler, although during wrestling season, he gets a little lethargic, which bums me out because he's not eating. So that's crazy. But yeah, I mean, I just love that connection between athletics and music. And I wish that more kids felt comfortable like doing both. So like if they have a game and they can't make the concert or they're going to be late, I'm like, okay, well, come on. If you get here, you can sing in your, softball uniform. And last year they did, and it was so great. Like I was so excited they made it. And yeah, so the two things that we're here and that, we're a place for all children, like, your rainbow children, your transgender children, your athletes, your superstars. We are a place where all children can be, loved, supported, and part of a community.
Yeah. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I've got my last question for you.
Okay.
Which is, I ask every guest this at the end of the episode. Do you know what zeitgeist means?
It's a German word that means, no, I do not know.
It means spirit of the times. So like Geist, like poltergeist, and then Zeit means time. Time ghost. Anyway, zeitgeist is like a word that refers to the cultural like feel of something. People like picture what it was like being alive like in the 90s, like around Y2K versus what it was like being alive here. That's kind of a broad cultural level, but I mean, it just means spirit of the times. I like to use it for like more microculture, like as well, like this like the environment of being in your choir room. The zeitgeist of your choir room is going to be so different from the zeitgeist of the sports stadium, right? They're still both very valid. They're still awesome, but they're just different.
Yeah.
So in the case, this is a musical podcast. So in the context of music, there's a moment I call a zeitgeist moment where you just plug in, right?
Yeah.
And you feel part of something bigger than yourself, and you're suddenly like connected to that fill in the blank, whether you're like listening to opera or like it could be literally anything. So I'll ask you, what was either a recent or a particularly memorable zeitgeist moment for you? And while you're thinking, I'll share one. I remember when we were in Ambiance and we went to Idaho.
ACDA.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm going to say?
No, I just know we went to ACDA. Tell me.
We went to ACDA. And we had this very particular, I'm pretty sure we were doing Las Amarias. Do you remember that one?
Now, how could I forget?
We worked so hard on that piece and it kept falling apart and it kept falling apart. But then one of our performances, I don't know, we kind of had a moment as a group together and it just clicked and it just like it was like so good. It was so good. And the camaraderie that I felt with that group in that moment while we were on stage, and we were just like bringing down the house. It was so good. It was so good. But it was because we'd had, I think the night before, we'd had like a really vulnerable like circle time session, just like in somebody's room or something. Like it was
nice.
It was really just like sharing.
Oh, you are bringing back some memories, buddy. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Circle time. That was pivotal for me as a growing
circle
human.
Time. Anytime there was not like if the teacher was gone or if, he
would give us time right after the concert where we could sit together and chat.
Yeah. We would sit in a circle and we'd just talk and share and be vulnerable high school girls.
That's amazing.
And so as we were talking about this episode in advance, I was thinking about like trust and like these things. And I was like, that to me was so pivotal, was that relationship. I absolutely 1,000% know that the relationships that we developed in circle time, in like the traveling, because also like we took the bus to Idaho.
Yeah, we did.
Did we
take a bus to San Francisco too?
I'm pretty sure we did, didn't we?
Oh, I don't remember that part.
Maybe we took a plane. I don't know. I remember lots of buses. I think we went on more tours. I think we went on 2 tours. Anyway, I just remember that camaraderie has such an impact on how you perform as an ensemble. And I really do believe that the closer that you are with the people and the more that you trust the people that you're singing with, the better you perform. And that moment with La Maria said ACDA was a moment for me where I just I felt so part of something bigger than myself. That's happened many times since then, but that was a particular moment in our
I love that you brought that back to me, because I remember that is the reason I wanted to become a choir teacher, because of that experience.
Yeah.
I don't know if I will ever take my group to ACDA, because it is scary as all get out, because people can be really judgmental. But I'm really glad that I got to go as a singer. And I remember our teacher being pretty dang scared. Like, he worked us that year.
He worked us really hard. Yeah. And that was a hard piece.
Yeah, it would. And I remember we also did Migración,
Oh, yeah.
Migración set Formosa. It was hard.
Yeah.
And then we also did This Little Babe, which remains one of my faves. This little babe, so beautiful.
I've done that one several times since.
Yeah,
I don't even need the music. I'm like, yeah, I got this.
yeah. And I've done it too with my kids, and they're always like, "What is happening here?" And I'm like, "Just go with it. It's gonna be great." So the question is, what is my recent zeitgeist moment?
Yeah, either a recent or a memorable one. Yeah.
Okay, so it was actually last night. So I told you already that I graduated all these wonderful humans.
Yeah.
And there were 12 of them who graduated last year. And so they were in my chamber group. There were 12 that were in my chamber group. So that meant that 4 remained. And not a single tenor.
Whoa, hold on. I just got the gravity of what you just said there.
Yeah, so the chamber group is 16 voices. They meet after school.
Goodness.
And they are tasked with singing all styles. So we do jazz, then we do classical, then we do jazz again, and then we do pop. And that's our 4 quarters. And they're, and they meet after school, and they are tasked with practicing their little faces off, and that extra hour, in choir, and making the time for that. They do get an extra credit for it. They also spend 3 Saturdays in late November and December caroling. And then sometimes I make them go in the evenings too. And, I'm like, well, we're going to the nursing home. Okay. The homework's not done, but I'll be there, And, so anyway, the zeitgeist was that I had these 12. I actually ended up with 17, because one kid, I keep it to 16 because that's as many as you can send to solo and ensemble, which is our competition. But one of the kids is Seventh-day Adventist, and she won't be able to sing the Saturday concert, or the Saturday. Yeah. So I can take 16, although probably some of them will go down because it's in February. So they'll get the flu and not be able to sing. But anyway, the point of the story is there are 13 new people who were carrying the weight of that group from last year. They rocked. Like they killed it at graduation. Everybody loved it. They sang a piece. They sang Gravity. Sarah Bareilles' Gravity mixed with Rocket Man. And it was this mashup. And and it was hard. And there were lots of solos, and then the choir would be under the solo, and the timing was tricky, and they just nailed it in a huge stadium, and it was crazy. So I know that my 13 new singers they're stressing about filling those shoes, and some of them are sophomores, so they're barely ready.
Yeah.
But the juniors, and then I have one new senior, is it two new seniors? They've been practicing their little faces off. We have this jazz piece. It was pretty hard. I picked a level 2, but I was telling the kids, I don't feel like this was level 2. It's out of 4. And to me, it seemed like 3.5. But they had a recording. And so I was just like, you got to practice. You got to listen to that recording. And one day I finally heard that they had been doing it. And then it started to sound great. And so last night I knew they were very nervous because there's only 16 of them. We were singing in the gym. It's a huge crowd. It's their first time out. And we were waiting in the hallway to go on while the jazz band was playing, and they all started doing the Macarena. And I was like, okay, they're going to be just fine. Now they have, because all day they had been super tight and really nervous and really extra loud. Singers, when they're nervous, just get loud, and because they're all external processors. And so I was like, oh my gosh, are they going to blow this? That would be terrible. But they did their little Macarena, and then they went on and nailed it. And it was so great.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And I was so happy for her.
Yay.
Yeah. Super cool.
Amazing. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for being on my podcast. This was so much fun.
I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate you making the time and spending the time to do it. It's really lovely.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Zeitgeist Radio. Please make sure to follow the podcast on your podcast app. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at Zeitgeist Academy, and you can always email me at info@zeitgeistacademy.com. I love hearing from you. Music for this episode was created by Ian Boswell. Please hit that subscribe button and tell all your friends you found a cool new podcast. See you next time.